Okay,
And we're live, Councillor.
I would like to call this committee of the whole meeting of November 30th, 2020 to order. Good evening, everyone. My name is Councillor Mike Meklick, Chair of the General Business and Finance Committee. We are meeting electronically through Zoom during this declared emergency period. Members of the public may observe the proceedings by accessing the live webcast on our YouTube channel. I will now ask the town clerk to complete a roll call of council so that we can confirm quorum. Julie, please go ahead.
Thank you. Councillor Rajima.
Here.
Councillor Russell.
Here.
Councillor Brunet.
Here.
Councillor Pachariva.
Here.
Councillor McPherson.
Here.
Councillor Timmers.
Here.
Councillor Reimer.
Here.
And Chair Meklick.
Here.
And Mayor Easton is marked absent. We have quorum.
Okay, perfect. In addition, I want to take a moment to welcome the staff we have joining us today electronically. Chief Administrative Officer Mike Kirkopoulos, Finance Treasurer Terry Trowala, Director of Planning and Development Kathleen Dale, Associate Director of Planning and Development Matt Bruder, Director of Community Services Shannon McKay, CEO Lincoln Public Library Julie Andrews, Fire Chief Greg Hudson, Director of Economic Development and Communications Paul Deaney, Director of Public Works Dave Graham, Liliana Busnello, Manager of Corporate Communications, Stephanie Hicks, Executive Director of the Beamsville BIA, Legislative and Committee Coordinator Aaron Plant, and moderating and clerking the meeting today we have our Town Clerk Julie Kirkelos. IT staff are in attendance. Also attending this evening we have from KPMG Lois Willette, Lead Audit Engagement Partner, and Scott Plugers, Audit Senior Manager. As this is a virtual meeting, I will ask that we follow some procedures during this electronic meeting. Should there be a connection or service disruption for the chair, or if quorum is lost, the chair and or clerk will call a 10-minute recess to reconnect and regain quorum. If quorum is lost, the meeting will be adjourned. If connection is lost from the chair, the clerk will ask those in attendance to wait up to 10 minutes to provide the chair time to reconnect and resume the meeting. Otherwise, after that time frame, the vice chair will resume the meeting until the chair has reconnected and resumes their role. Each member of council who wishes to speak, press the raise hand feature on your video call and the clerk will track our speakers list today and then invite you to speak when I open it up for quorum or for questions or comments. Also, when I finish reading a motion and announcing the mover, the clerk will then call out a vote by reading each council member's name out loud. Please remember to take yourselves off mute during this portion of the meeting so that you can confirm if you support or oppose. Also, when not speaking, please remember to put yourselves on mute. Declarations of interest. Are there any declarations of interest this evening? Okay, seeing none. Confirmation of agenda. Do members have any amendments to the order of the agenda? Okay, we'll move on to 5, statutory public meetings. We have no statutory public meetings. Although there are no statutory public meetings occurring for this evening's committee of the whole meeting, staff established procedures for the public to participate at future meetings. Information is available on our town's website, and any future notices of public meetings will also provide directions on how the public can participate. First, we're going to start with the General Business and Finance Committee agenda. Delegations. We have no delegations this evening for the General Business and Finance Committee. Item 6.2, consent agenda. We are now considering consent agenda item 6.2, Library Board minutes of October 20th, 2020. Would any members like to remove this item from the consent agenda to discuss?
Chair Meklick, we have Councillor McPherson.
Councillor McPherson, okay. This item is now being considered now. Councillor McPherson, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I just have a question with regards to really the comments within the minutes about the new logo and the color scheme. And I will preface it by saying that I am always challenged as to the legislative separation between town council and the library. So I will say I'm not sure if this is our jurisdiction, but I do want to ask the question with regards to branding and alignment with branding. The town has spent, a fair bit of time over the last several years in the branding area. And my question is probably through to the CAO as far as alignment of the library's color scheme. I don't have it here in front of me, but I think that it was a red, a blue, and I'm going to say it was a yellow. And I just wonder if we've had the library go through our communications department to, I guess, sign off on the color scheme.
We can put that to our CAO, and if he feels there's other members present to comment further, welcome those comments.
Through you, Mr. Chair, to the councillor. So I haven't had extensive conversations with Julie on her logo. I know that in the development of the logo, it was shared through her board, and Julie did share it with the senior management team. However, it is a distinct brand, and I do believe, Julie, correct me if I'm wrong, that you did have some conversations with our team relative to some of our colors, and was there a integration of those colors? I know some of our secondary colors that we use do mimic some of the colors that you've used in your brand, but maybe you could speak a little bit to kind of the design, the look and feel, and why you felt maybe updating your logo made sense in the context of working with us.
Certainly. Through you, Mr. Chair, to the councillor, we did consult with Leanne in the communications department during the design portion of the logo. So she had input into the color scheme as it was with regard to the town's color scheme, as well as the design of the logo. So we did vet it through her at that time.
Very good. Thank you very much, Julie. That's perfect. Thank you, Mr. Chair. That's all the questions I had.
Thank you very much, Councillor. Ms. Kirklos, I see Councillor Pachariva's got his hand up.
He does.
Okay, go ahead, Councillor.
Yeah, thank you, Chair McLuck. Deputy Mayor McLuck, I might correct myself. Sorry, sir. For those of you too that are just going by the minutes in your council, what is that that we get every Friday? Information package?
The councillor information package.
Yes, a couple weeks ago, the logos were shared. So hopefully everyone took a look at them. The old logo of the Lincoln Public Library was very, very, very dated. There's another word I want to use, but I shan't use it. It was time for a refresh and a time for an upgrade and a time for a revisit. And it goes hand in glove with the new strategic plan that's being ushered forth by the library. So I'd direct you back to the package from a couple of weeks ago, and you can have a look at that and the logo and color and why we chose what we did, along with possibly becoming a friend of the library.
Thank you very much, Councillor. Question I would maybe ask to Ms. Andrews is, was the public at all consulted? Who all was involved in the process of designing the logo? Was there any feedback, either positive, negative?
We did consult with numerous stakeholders, Councillor, in the creation of the design and in the color choices. So it was quite a lengthy process. We did quite a bit of consultation around that.
Okay. It's important because we don't want to be changing logos all the time because we, feel that we made a mistake or anything like that. We want to make sure that we get that logo done right the first time. So it's good to hear. Any other members have questions or comments? Okay, there being no further discussion, I have a motion moved by Councillor Pachariva that council received for information item 6.2 Lincoln Public Library Board minutes of October 20th, 2020. I will now ask our clerk to call the vote.
Thank you. Councillor Brunet,
Yes.
Councillor McPherson,
Yes.
Councillor Pachariva,
Yes.
Councillor Reimer,
Yes.
Councillor Rajima. Councillor Rajima,
Sorry, I thought I was unmuted. Yes.
thank you. Councillor Russell,
Yes.
Councillor Timmers,
Yes.
and Chair Micklick,
Yes.
and the mayor is marked absent. That carries.
Okay. Item 6.3 report. We will now consider item 6.3 AD-09-20 Beamsville Downtown Business Improvement Area, or the BIA 2021 budget. Before we receive questions from council or comments, I'll ask Mr. Deaney to perhaps speak to it briefly. It is a budget item. It is important that we have some discussion on it.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Micklick, and through you to committee. In front of you this evening, members of committee, is the report for the Beamsville Downtown Business Improvement Areas 2021 budget. It is a legislative requirement that the municipalities sign off on their BIA's budget because they are a board of council. So in front of you this evening is their 2021 budget. Quick point, and Ms. Hicks is here this evening from the BIA to answer any questions in regards to their budget. But the quick point that I'd like to make is that the BIA budget is set by their board and approved by their members. And there is no budget impact to the municipality. This is rated on properties in the BIA catchment area that are either commercial or industrial. So happy to answer any questions on the report this evening. And again, Ms. Hicks is here from the BIA to answer any questions that are about their budget specifically. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Deaney. Julie, do we have any questions?
We do, Chair Micklick. So the first up is Councillor Brunet.
Okay, Councillor Brunet, go ahead.
Yes, thank you. Through you, Chair Mikulak. Just maybe a clarification, if we could. In reading the report under the revenues, obviously we've got the 93,000, which is the tax levy, which will be against the rateable properties of the Beamsville Downtown Business Improvement Area. And then we have a line for $25,000, which is carryover. I'm just wondering if someone could just comment if this is, obviously 2020 has been a very difficult year for many, and I'm sure it's been very challenging, and we certainly didn't have the events that we wanted. But I'm just wondering if maybe our CAO or if Stephanie or Paul could comment. Just curious as to whether a carryover item or really creating, I guess, a bit of a reserve, if you may, is common practices in BIAs and municipalities in Ontario. Thank you, Chair.
Excellent question, Councillor. Mr. Deaney, would you like to?
Yes, thank you, Deputy Mayor. So I actually will turn it over to Ms. Hicks from the BIA to answer that question. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Hicks, for showing up tonight. If you
Thank
could,
you.
please. We welcome you.
Thank you, and through you, Mr. Chair. So it is common for BIAs to have, there's two types of, reserves that they can carry over: operational reserves, where they hold about 3 to 6 months of their operating budget. This is in case if there's a delay in the levy coming into their bank account, and also capital reserves. So in this particular case, we're looking at this $25,000 as being a capital reserve, which is specific to projects that are aligned with our strategic plan. So looking into 2021, and you're correct, 2020 was not the year that we perceived it to be. However, we did have many successes, one of which, when I do my end of year presentation to council, I will speak to, but that was partnering with the town of Lincoln for the regional grant for the PRIP funding. And basically that allowed us to implement $48,000 worth of beautification into the downtown, that if we didn't have the carryover from the year previous, we wouldn't have been able to make all of those beautification projects that we slated to happen over a few years happen at once, and they did all happen this year. So that was a great success project, or success story, that we were able to do because we had reserves from previous. So for 2021, specifically grants. So when we go after grants, a lot of times grants have a match funding contribution or a certain percent contribution towards the grant. So slated in our current budget, we wouldn't have the reserves to be able to match any grant funding should we be successful in receiving a grant, such as the PRIP application, because that match funding was about $20,000 of our budget. Also, we are looking at implementing some banners into the downtown. Once the Lincoln 50th banners and that year is complete, I have spoken to Public Works, and there's no foreseeable future of them putting banners in right now. So into the downtown core, we were looking at implementing some banners, and there's a cost to getting, you know, from design to installing, to creating and installing those banners. The hillside garden beds that we place, there's room for 4 more, and those are quite costly. The most expensive cost is, I would call it the capital expense of having that logo created. After that, it's just the maintenance and upkeep. So if we wanted to maintain that space to a larger beautification project, and then there's just the uncertainty of 2021 as well. We don't know what kind of initiatives we're going to have to launch for our members because of COVID. So I hope that answers the question on why we hold reserves, and it is common practice, and into kind of what we have slated for those reserves.
Counselor?
Yeah, that's great, Stephanie. I really appreciate the comment. You know, the question was really in no way, shape, or form questioning what we're doing. I just think it's important from an optics standpoint and transparency. I think it's really important to communicate that what we're doing here in the BIA is quite normal, and I'm glad you answered it the way you did. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councilor Brunet. I asked that same similar question earlier, and I felt that perhaps there was a lack of ability to spend that money, given the fact that we couldn't have that fling on king, this sort of thing, and you know, perhaps moving forward, next year we'll have a party that's twice as big, you know, depending on how things go through this COVID. So thank you for that answer. Councillor Timmers, I see your hand is up.
It is. Thank you very much, Chair Mikulik. Through to Ms. Hicks, kudos to you. I am just so impressed with how far the BIA has come, and to Councillor McPherson and all the members that sit around that table. I was so happy to be at the AGM and to see the approval of your new constitution. It's been an incredible amount of heavy lifting that's happened in the past 6 years, and it's just fantastic. And I just want to tell you how pleased I hear comments all the time, how fantastic the downtown's looking, and the, you know, all the different special projects, the photos, and this, you know, there's a list. Anyway, it's very impressive, very, very thankful for the work that's happening there. And I want to put on the table right now that we need to encourage you down the road to Vineland. So I don't know how we're going to do that, Stephanie, but I just want to put that out there right now. So thank you.
Through you, Chair, I will happily work with the town and council on that initiative. And thank you very much for your comments. I will pass them along to the board, and council can see tonight in your package as well is our constitution that we're looking for you to adopt. It has been through our it was approved at our membership of our AGM, and it's taken our board personally since 2018 to get that document complete. So I appreciate all your comments, Councillor Timmers.
Thank you very much, Councillor Timmers. Definitely, we've come a long way. Okay. There being no further discussion, I have a motion moved by Councillor McPherson that council endorse the 2021 operating budget for the Beamsville Downtown Business Improvement Area attached as Appendix A to Report AD-09-20 in the amount of $118,000, and that the levy portion of the operating budget for the Beamsville Downtown Business Improvement Area in the amount of $93,000 be approved, and that the treasurer be hereby authorized to and directed to make arrangements to levy of $93,000 against rateable properties in the Beamsville Downtown Business Improvement Area pursuant to Section 208 of the Municipal Act 2001 and the Town of Lincoln bylaw number 2019-16 to the levy 2021 budget as referenced above, and that the schedule of payments for 2021 be in accordance with the Town of Lincoln tax payment schedule, that council endorse Beamsville Downtown Business Improvement Area's constitution. I will now ask our clerk to call out the vote.
Thank you. Councillor Bernay,
Yes.
Councillor McPherson,
Yes.
Councillor Pachariva,
Yes.
Councillor Reimer,
Yes.
Councillor Rajima,
Yes.
Councillor Russell,
Yes.
Councillor Timmers,
Yes.
Chair Micklick,
Yes.
and Mayor Easton is marked absent. That carries.
Okay. Item 6.4, we have a presentation this evening from KPMG Lois Willett, Lead Audit Engagement Partner, and Scott Plugers, Audit Senior Manager regarding financial statements and audit finding report for 2019. The report is included in the agenda. Presentations are allowed 10 minutes. However, if more time is required, please let me know and council may extend by majority vote. Scott and Lois, welcome. Please go ahead.
That's great. Thank you. And good evening, everyone. I think I'm flying solo tonight. I'm looking for Lois, but she doesn't appear to be on, and which is okay. And I know I've come before council before and certainly happy to be here tonight. Lois, as engagement partner, is retiring in September of 2020. So if those that have met Lois, had the pleasure of working with her, she is retiring. So I think she's taking a nice smooth transition into retirement several months early, but nonetheless, certainly well involved in the audit, working with both Mike and Terry and the team. So once again, thanks for having me tonight. I will take you through the findings report, I believe, first, followed by the financial statements, just in order of the package that you have before you. So I believe I'm starting on page 24 of your package, and which is the audit findings report. So what I'm going to do, actually, in talking with Julie just earlier, I'm going to share my screen. So I'll look for a few head nods if I can in just a moment. Let's make sure I can do this properly. Can everyone see my screen okay?
Yes.
That's great. It'll just help rather than continuing to say, please, next page and next slide and so on. It'll flow a little bit easier. So where actually I'll start is just on the executive summary here. And, really to kick things off, it might seem like a bit of an abnormal year, and certainly that's 2020 to a T, coming before you in November, as opposed to, in previous years in early summer or late spring. But certainly that's no reflection on the town or any other circumstance in particular, really just a function of the year and ensuring that we were able to get ready and come out before the audit. So all of that being said, I want to extend my thank you to Mike and Terry and the team for really, a well-executed audit. If you can imagine, we completed this financial statement audit for the town completely remotely, which is, a kudos to the management team to be able to support that through the use of some of our tools and share sites and various secure ways that we can complete audits remotely. So again, just a big thank you to management there.
So with respect to where we are at with finalizing the audit, we are substantially complete the audit of the town's financial statements for the December 31st, 2019 year end, save and except for a few kind of housekeeping procedures right now, which do need to be completed, which include just obtaining some updated legal confirmations. Given the passage of time, we want to make sure we've got legal's input with respect to the financial statements. And then the next 3 bullet points there, the signed management representation letter, of course, completing our discussions with you tonight, and then ultimate evidence of council's approval of the financial statements. We are prepared to issue an unqualified audit opinion, or in other words, a clean audit opinion. So certainly a good result to highlight there. Not expecting anything significant to come up as a result of any of these remaining, again, what I'll call housekeeping matters, but certainly if something does arise for whatever reason, we will let you know as council. It is important to just remind you as council as well that we are independent with respect to the town and the services that we do provide the town, both from a financial statement standpoint and non-financial statement standpoint, and continue to monitor that and review that as well. And Lois, as engagement partner, certainly has her hands in that to make sure that our independence maintains intact throughout the year. Certainly the impact of COVID-19 is really more prevalent in your 2020 audit. We'll highlight that for you just throughout the report. Really one accounting policy that the town adopted for the 2019 year end, there's been no changes or impact to town's reporting. It was a pretty minor standard by the way accounting standards go, but it's of course important that those charged with governance, being yourselves, is aware when there's a change in accounting policy. With respect to control deficiencies and other observations, we have identified one matter to bring to your attention for information, but certainly nothing that warrants the level of a significant deficiency or any significant concern from our end, but just more of an observation to highlight for you there. And then as well, page 10 has provided you with our summary of audit differences. Okay. So on to page 3, our significant risks that are each and every year we report to you. The Canadian auditing standards require auditors to address 2 risks in each and every audit, both fraud risk from revenue recognition and the fraud risk from management override of controls. Happy to report no significant findings by way of either of these risks addressed in our audit file. On page 4, and then carries on to page 5. So, I hope that you've had a chance to take a look through this and certainly can answer any questions. The impact of COVID-19 as it relates to municipal December year ends for the 2019 year end really was a subsequent event by definition, right? Certainly this came to light in March and really reared its head in April as emergency orders started to be implemented and the next several months carried on. So from a subsequent event standpoint, we've looked at that with management, understood any potential implications as it relates to your December 31st, 2019 financial statements. But the reality is there's no significant impact to your statements at December 31st, 2019, except for some additional note disclosure to highlight the fact that there was a subsequent event. So just an important point to highlight there, but certainly had to be addressed in our audit file given the timing of when the audit ran, as well as just the nature of COVID-19. Page 6, so we provide you materiality each and every year, consistent, calculated with the previous year and past years for the town's financial statement audits. Materiality for the financial statements as a whole for the December 31st year end was $885,000, fairly consistent with $799,000 for the previous year. And of course, we provide to you performance materiality and what we refer to as our audit misstatement posting threshold, which is really the key number to take away from this slide here. So we set materiality for the financial statements as a whole, but certainly we work to a much lower number than that, just for your reference. And then because you are a group audit, both the town and Peninsula West Power Inc., as your investment is held, we do have to factor in considerations for the group audit as well. So materiality is provided there. On page 7, so some summaries, of course, you do have some estimates, both being employee future benefit liabilities for retirement, post-retirement, and employee future benefits as it pertains to things like health and dental benefits. So that's summarized for you here. And some of the work we do around, engaging with the actuary, understanding the inputs that go into that estimate. Similarly for landfill, working with your departments to understand any potential impacts of landfill liabilities, contaminated sites, and spills and that nature, just to ensure we understand completeness of any potential ongoing liabilities, whether it be remediation and monitoring and what have you. So again, no concerns overall from our procedures here, but just some significant estimates that we do like to highlight to you. Page 8 summarizes a little bit of detail around some of the more areas where we spend time, whether it be due to volume, the size of transactions, so of course government grants, payroll, and then your tangible capital assets or your infrastructure assets. No concerns to report as a result of our overall testing here. Technology in the audit. So, really, I do find this important to highlight to members of council and, boards as we continue to present in these times, is really just the ability for us to work remotely, share information, and ensure that is secure. So from a firm standpoint, that's one of the utmost priorities for us in completing our audits remotely. So just providing a bit of information around how we were able to do that with management using our client collaboration site there. Page 10 summarizes for you the corrected differences in the financial statements. For the most part, largely reclassification in nature. So really just moving that, let's say in simple terms, between line items on your financial statements, which I will highlight to you when we go through the financial statements. One adjustment here to adjust a federal grant that was received in the year, really just to some of the nuances within public sector accounting standards. So no real reflection on the controls in place at the town or what have you, but really a function again of the nuances of the standard requiring you to amortize a grant that was received for where you're required to do something for an ongoing period of time. So this adjustment was done through consultation with management and ensuring consistency with public sector accounting standards. Overall, though, no impact on our audit report or the financial statements as well. Okay. Page 11, we provided you with a bit of an observation in terms of our work around developer contributed assets. Certainly 2019 saw some significant increases on the development side on receipts of development charges, applications, planning applications, and so forth. So, provided a bit of context here around some of the observations. Again, not a significant deficiency. I mean, the reality is you've got a bit of a difference between what you do on the budget side and what you do kind of on your day-to-day operations. And then once a year, you have to be able to convert that to public sector accounting standards and report for financial statements. So a bit of the nuance there as this relates specifically to financial statements. Okay. Page 12, a bit of information for your reading just around some of the areas that we're seeing and really, some of the concerns we're seeing amongst many of our clients, both with respect to fraud and procurement as well. And sometimes those are a little bit intertwined as well. So certainly happy if there's any questions or observations or considerations, happy to take those there. COVID resources and responses as well, providing that, just a little bit more information, I'm sure, than what's already being passed your way routinely, but certainly a little bit more light reading if you're interested in some of KPMG's thought literature and considerations around the impact of COVID-19. Okay. And then maybe the last comment on the findings report, just before opening it up to questions or moving on to the statements, is around current developments and audit trends. So asset retirement obligations, I believe you would have heard me speak about this in the past. This is a new standard that is coming. Now, fortunately, or unfortunately, depending on how you look at it, but with COVID-19, PSAB and the standard setters have recognized, the onerous tasks placed on management just in terms of the day-to-day activities, and have now actually deferred the implementation of this standard by 1 year. So certainly, provides a little bit of relief for management. That's not to say that this can be discounted and just pushed down the road. It will be a pretty significant standard as it relates to public sector accounting standards, and will require work both on the part of finance and operations, roads, maintenance, and the like. So we continue to remind management, talk with management to understand the game plans, and certainly get a little bit of relief from the timelines, but just to remind you as council that this standard is coming and will certainly be a pretty exhaustive standard on the part of management. And the rest of our report, standard communications, required communications. Hopefully that was helpful, but happy to take any questions unless you'd like me just to flip to the statements.
So Chair Miklick, before we begin the financial statements, I'd like to request that council extend the time of the presentation until completion. We require a majority vote to do that.
Okay,
Thank you.
let's go ahead.
Thank you. Just 1 second here. Councillor Brunet,
Yes.
Councillor McPherson,
Yes.
Chair Miklick,
Yes.
Councillor Pachariva,
Yes.
Councillor Reimer,
Yes.
Councillor Rajima,
Yes.
Councillor Russell,
Yes.
Councillor Timmers.
Yes.
Majority have voted in favor. Scott, you may carry on.
Sure, thanks, Julie. And there are, am I following this right? Normally, sorry, we use Teams at the firm, and so I'm just getting used to Zoom here and there periodically, but I think there's 2 hand raised. I just want to make sure if there are, I'm happy to address them, or if you'd like me to continue, whichever the town prefers.
I do see that we have some hands raised. Chair Miklick, would you like to take questions now or wait until completion?
I would say we take questions now so that we don't, we stay on point with this particular report before we get to the financial statement.
Perfect. So first up that we have, I show, is Councillor McPherson.
Okay, go ahead, Councillor McPherson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and through you to Scott. Thank you for the presentation, Scott. And my question is from page 12. You did reference, that there are two areas that it sounds like you are just throwing a caution out to all municipalities to maybe tighten up, in these areas. So my question would be, do you see opportunities within the town of Lincoln? Does this make sense for us to pursue this, the areas of fraud and I think it's procurement procedures? Do you see us taking up your suggestion to do workshops, to do whatever it is that we could do to tighten things up?
Sure, absolutely. And it is completely, just an observation and insight that we're seeing. And from my view, when we put these together, I do find it's important. The audit is one piece, and that's great, and that's always forward or backwards looking. But it's really more about forward looking in some of the insights, and fraud and procurement in particular are areas where we're just seeing, consistent concerns and areas of concern, whether it be actual known suspected fraud, however you want to phrase it. In the past 12 to 18 months, it's happening more and more frequently. I don't know, I wouldn't say that COVID's highlighted that, but there's just a number of factors that we're considering on the fraud piece. And I think what's most interesting to highlight for you as council is just, it's not sophisticated frauds you might be hearing in the news around these complex structures and mechanisms in terms of how it's perpetrated. It's oftentimes just, whether it's oversight by staff, and then not, again, just general commentary, oversight by staff, very simple ways around changing vendor invoices, for example, which is hence how that gets tied into the procurement side of the house. Oftentimes in the public sector space, especially, you do have procurement policies and procurement bylaws and very, we'll call them good controls in place in terms of delegation of authority, approval processes, and what have you. But what happens is people start to find ways to work within those controls, and that's where you run into trouble. And so really from our side, it's just, if nothing else, a reminder we get busy, we work through the day-to-day COVID and the likes. It's really just level setting, at least, once a year. Are we good? Have we done a review internally? It doesn't have to be comprehensive. It just has to be something to consider. Is management comfortable with their processes? Are there any gaps? Do we need to review anything of that nature? So do I see any specific risks at the town that I've come across as part of the audit? No, but that's not to say that that can't happen at any point in time. And I think the nature of fraud is such that really it's not about a materiality perspective at that point anymore. It's just about once it happens, it's a pretty big shock, whether it's $10 or whether it's 1,000 or $1 million. It's hard to judge that. So it'd be up to yourselves, obviously, but from my perspective, it's always good at least once a year to have that review, if nothing else, as a management team to make sure, because some of this does come down at the end of the day to employee and human interaction, which is, the phishing schemes, traditional, right? If you think about that, oftentimes those can go overlooked, and when you get busy, that's when things happen.
So thank you for that. So through you, Mr. Chair, I would assume then that these two individuals that you've got listed here in the report would then work with us to assess our level of exposure, if you will, to potential, fraud, and would give us some kind of guidance in shoring up those ends that may be loose at this time. Is that fair to say?
Absolutely, yeah. So Karen Grogan specifically, who's mentioned there, is a partner out of our Waterloo office who has extensive experience, and she's always happy and willing to spend that 30-minute kind of coffee chat to say, hey, have you considered this? Just any observations. As a firm, we have a checklist which we'd be happy to share, and then management takes that away. It's really nothing from our involvement, but it can give them some observations and considerations to think of. And then Karen is always there as a resource, whether it's a question or whether it's something further. But in terms of being able to chat with Mike or Terry and the team, whoever that is, she'd more than happy be be able to jump on that call for sure.
Good. Thank you, Scott. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
You're welcome, Councillor. Julie, who do we have next?
We have Councillor Russell up next.
Councillor Russell.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Scott, for the presentation. My question is regarding page 11. I just want to scoot up one. On there, you mentioned it was more around the timing of our assumption of some of our developments, and that it may not have been in line with what would be the normal assumption timing. I wonder if you can just give some insight into that a little bit.
For sure. So from a financial statement standpoint, when development occurs and development completes, and at the end of the day, the developers don't retain those assets. So roads, for example, in a subdivision, the requirement or the trigger under public sector accounting standards to recognize those is when council formally assumes the subdivision or accepts responsibility. And so that would say, okay, once that happens, so say in 2019, council would have assumed 3 formal subdivisions by way of approval. That's when management would go through an exercise to evaluate the fair market value of those assets and then record them at that time. So what happened was at the planning and the application stage, these assets, part of the assets of these subdivisions that were assumed formally in 2019 were actually recognized as tangible capital assets in the financial statements in 2016. So there's a bit of a timing difference between when they actually made their way to the statements in 2016 versus when they should have in 2019 as formally assumed by council. So what I mean by it's a little bit of a statement thing, like from an operation and management standpoint, you know, you still have line of sight on the fact that you've assumed these assets. You have responsibility from operations to maintain and monitor and so forth. It's just, again, the timing of when they should have been recognized in the financial statements. I don't know, and I'm happy to keep going over if I can clarify a bit further. I want to make sure I get that across okay.
Yeah, no, that's good. Thank you, Scott. And then, so a follow up to that to staff, and forgive me, I'm not sure if this will go to Mike or CAO, if we go to Terry, or if we go to planning. But is that essentially an accounting treatment, or were those actually in line with the physical assumption through the approval of council?
Mr. Kravopoulos.
So through you, Mr. Chair, I'm going to let, I think, Terry start with that. It's probably more of a finance question and some of the communication that often happens between planning and timing and the timing of that. I don't think we were very off in that timing. And Scott, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it was just a matter in our conversations when we reviewed the findings of just continuing to have communication between the planning department, public works, I think, as a subset of that, and when things come on board. So Terry?
So through the through the chair, in 2016 is when the work was completed. And so once the work is completed, we put together the information that is going to be needed for it. However, it shouldn't actually be put into the financial statements until the assumption bylaw is approved. So we put it in as soon as we got the information instead of holding on to the information and putting it on once it was assumed. So going forward, we definitely have the processes and procedures updated so that we don't do that again.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, staff, and thank you, Scott.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor, for that question. Next, Julie, who do we have?
We have Councillor Brunet. Chair Micklek.
Councillor Brunet, go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Chair Micklek. Through you to Scott. Scott, thank you very much for the report. You know, I kind of hesitated to ask this question, but I'm going to ask it anyway. You mentioned, Scott, in your discussion, you mentioned a couple times. You talked about independence, and you talked about public sector accounting practices, and I'm just asking the question for open and transparent reasons. I think a lot of this is optics. I don't know who touches these audit findings report from KPMG, but you know, Scott, you mentioned specifically in terms of materiality, and you distinguish the component between the corporation of the town of Lincoln and specifically on that one page right there, the Peninsula West Power Inc. So through you, Chair, to Scott, I'm just wondering if you could comment just, you know, the guiding principles and how this goes, you know, in terms of a firm like yours dealing with a municipality whereby, your firm is also involved with Penn West Hydro, your firm is also involved in NPEI, and just a perceived conflict of interest or just how that works with guiding principles with firms like KPMG.
For sure. So, and I would start, am I okay? I thought I
yeah, go ahead.
So, I would say that it is actually quite common across the municipal sector when many municipalities, of course, have their investment in their hydro subsidiaries, that we are the auditor of both hydro and the municipality as well. So it is actually common practice, at least from our standpoint, in terms of that. How that normally works from an independent standpoint is really just around when there's, services, let's call it outside the scope of the audit. Because if we break it into just the financial statement audit, from an independent standpoint, so Lois is engagement partner of both Penn West Power, Niagara Peninsula Energy, and the town of Lincoln. And when it comes to an audit of a financial statements as a whole, that independence really is maintained in that regard. I see this as when there are service offerings to be had, whether it's valuations work, whether it's work outside the scope of the audit, the independence rules kick in right away. And as a firm, we take that seriously. I mean, that's really the crux of what we do. And if we're not independent, we certainly have big problems, for lack of a better word. And so the checks and balances in place really are, whether it's Lois recusing herself as engagement partner, myself, if I were involved in other audits, the other partners that might come on to provide certain services, whether it be to one entity to another, depending on how that transaction works or what the nature of the requested service is for. The firm steps in through our risk management process to be able to interject and say, you've got a problem here. So you either need to put the appropriate safeguards in place to manage and mitigate the independence risk, or you have to decline and defer the service. I mean, I don't know if that helps. It's just, we've got a lot of risk management policies and procedures and fact checking, and that goes on in the background within the firm and our risk management group to make sure that our independence is intact.
No, absolutely, Scott. And I really appreciate your candid comments. I think it's important. I think a lot of times, when we're talking about this stuff, it's wise to get it out in front and not to hide behind something and maybe, be afraid to talk about it. So that's why I posed the question, and I appreciate your candid comments.
Oh, no problem. That's okay.
I thought that was a very good question, Councillor. Transparency is key in minimizing the risk of a possible conflict of interest. Scott answered that question great.
Absolutely. Okay.
Do we have any other questions, Ms. Kirklos?
No, we do not.
Okay, so then shall we move on to the financial statements portion?
Sure. Okay, great, thanks. So I will take you through the financial statements. If that's okay, we'll focus on the town's financial statements. I don't think we'll go through the trust financial statements in detail, but certainly I can take any questions if there are any as it pertains to the trusts. As you can see, of course, the financial statements do still say draft, and that ties back into just some of those few remaining, I'll call them again, housekeeping matters prior to us issuing our audit opinion. But certainly once those are wrapped up and completed, again, we're prepared to remove the draft watermark, put our signature on the audit report, and then issue again an unqualified or a clean audit opinion. And you'll find that right here in this first paragraph here, just for your reference. Okay. I know the audit report is quite lengthy, so I'll save you the time and pain of reading through that. And if we can just skip to the first page, so the statement of financial position or the balance sheet here. So this will summarize for you your assets and your liabilities for the year ended December 31st, 2019, and then as well non-financial assets, which are largely, of course, your infrastructure, roads, waters, vehicles, land, building, and so forth there. And this is consistent with PSAB or public sector accounting standards. Okay, so it starts with your total financial assets at the year ended December 31st, 2019 of 58.8 million. That's up from 51.4 million for the same time period, December 31st, 2018. Certainly a number of items in play here, some significant balances, of course, being long-term investments that are held. And really the nature of the long-term investments could be things like your GICs or investments that are held to maturity beyond 1 year. So it's not just your traditional maybe 3 months security deposits or GICs, if you will, but those more long-term investments in that presentation would be consistent with PSAB. Your cash, 7 million for the year ended December 31st, 2019. I will walk through the cash change balance on the statement of cash flow, if that's okay, once we get there. With respect to your financial liabilities, so certainly quite a big increase from the prior year, but there are a number of things driving that increase, both from a good standpoint, as it relates to the town and fiscal responsibility. So no real concerns with any new liabilities, really just routine in the nature of operations that happened in 2019. So you can see for the year ended December 31st, 2019, financial liabilities of 41.4 million in comparison with 26 million in the prior year. Really, the three changes we'll call it, the first one being your increase in long-term debt. There was some new debt that was taken on in 2019 through the region, and that's where that would show up there as part of your long-term debt, offset by some principal repayments that, of course, were made throughout the year. Deferred revenue has increased quite a bit, so really this is a function of timing, largely due to grants and development charges as well that have come in in advance of spending requirements or being able to spend those and recognizing those. So I'll highlight those for you as part of note 7. But again, just quite a significant increase there, and largely due to timing of cash receipt again versus the spend. Other current liabilities have increased as well due to some significant deposits that were received as part of 2019 and site plan deposits. Still an overall net financial asset position. So from a public sector standard standpoint, that is still a good number and a good metric to see for a municipality at 17.6 million compared to 25.2 million in the prior year, but still a positive indicator there as a net financial asset. Of course, your non-financial assets largely being made up of tangible capital assets, 149 million, up from 139 million in the prior year, for a total accumulated surplus at the end of the year of 167 million. And of course, the new note on the balance sheet, as you can see here, subsequent event, which I'll draw attention just in a few moments here. So on the consolidated statements of operations and accumulated surplus, or in other words, an income statement, you can see here total revenues for the year ended December 31st, 2019, 31.6 million, up slightly from comparison to budget, but certainly there's a number right over here that's not budgeted for under normal budgeting practices, which makes sense. This is an accounting function here as opposed to a budget of cash receipts or a budget of dividends, just as a side note. 31.6 million though for 2019 compared with 29.5 million in the prior year. Certainly some grants were able to be recognized throughout the year, both from a gas tax perspective, as well as other various provincial grants that have been received in the year. You have your property tax and taxation revenue of 24 million compared with 22 million in the prior year. With respect to expenses, so these are your expenses by your function, and this is consistent with public sector accounting standards. I will draw attention to one of the schedules in the back that's required disclosure that will break out your expenses in a bit more detail on things like salaries and purchase goods and contract services and so forth. But total expenses for the year, 29.4 million compared with 27 million in the prior year. This for an annual surplus for the December 31st, 2019 year end of 2.1 million, very consistent year over year. And again, that really is an accounting surplus, so it's not a cash surplus, it's not a budget surplus, if you will. This is a financial statement surplus. So a little bit again of the nuance between budget and financial statements.
You see, I've stayed in touch with Home Equity Bank, and I've talked to some of their clients. They've been able to access tax-free cash. Yes, tax-free.
Oh, okay. There we go.
So, okay.
There we go. Okay. It's a consolidated statement of change in net financial assets. So that indicator that I highlighted for you on the statement of financial position, this statement will reconcile for you the surplus from your statement of operations, 2.1 million, to the change in your net financial assets. So during the year, you actually had a draw, we'll call it a draw on net financial assets, but really what that meant was you invested much more in the year 2019 in your infrastructure and tangible capital assets, as you can see here, a significant use. So what that means is you've raised funds and you've earned funds in prior years that you've now in 2019 planned for a significant expenditure for, and therefore have just drawn down, if you will, that net financial asset indicator by 7 million, again, largely due to the acquisition of tangible capital assets. And then lastly here, the consolidated statement of cash flows. To be honest, the easiest way to, and the best way to take the most from this statement without getting number by number is to first read these through its subtotals. So starting with the first subtotal here, 8.3 million compared with 8.6 million in the prior, so very consistent year over year. That is really just the cash generated from the day-to-day operations of running the town. So the day-to-day of running recreation, of running facilities, of providing services to the residents of Lincoln, 8.3 million generated in cash. Again, that's as at a point in time year over year. But what that allows you to do is look at where you're able to spend and invest and financing activities, if you will. So from there, you spent 15.7 million in capital activities, again, largely due to cash used to acquire or invest in tangible capital assets. Some small minor changes in your investing activities due to some timing of changes in investments and accrued income as it relates to the investment, as well as some dividend income from Penn West Power. And then financing activities. So 14.1 million generated in financing activities in the year. What this number means is that 14.1 million in cash was received in the year, whether due to long-term liabilities assumed, as you can see here, or we call it obligatory deferred receipts, or your obligatory deferred reserves, things like gas tax, things like development charges, cash receipts coming in to be able to finance operations, and capital as well, sorry, of course. For an increase in cash from financing activities of 14 million, for an overall increase as at December 31st, 2019, year over year of 6.6 million. And then maybe just a few quick comments on the remainder of the statements prior to taking any questions on the statements. The next several pages here are your significant accounting policies, with save and except for the new policy that was adopted in the year, which again, no change on operations or financial statements. Your financial accounting policies are consistently applied year over year and in accordance with public sector accounting standards, which is important to highlight. And then the next 15 or so pages, they're quite lengthy, but they do provide great detail and a bit more context to what you see on the face of the statements, providing whether it's details on changes in balances in the year, key transactions, what have you. Again, each note reference provides a bit more context for you as it relates to those balances on the balance sheet. And then the last note maybe I can highlight here before turning it over for any questions is just, this is your segmented note, by the way, as I mentioned as well, just in terms of being able to look at your expenses, both by function, so by department or by area, and then as well by type or by object. And then the last one I'll highlight for you here is just with respect to subsequent events. This language and wording, we worked with Mike and Terry to formalize that, make sure it was factually accurate. This is consistent with many of our other municipal audits in terms of highlighting the fact that, COVID-19 was a subsequent event, but no impact to your financial statements. Okay, so hopefully that was helpful. Happy to take any specific questions as it relates to the financial statements or highlight anything that I might have missed.
Thank you very much, Scott. Do members of council have any questions regarding the financial statement?
I don't see any hands raised.
Must have explained yourself quite well there, Mr.
Either that or talked in circles, one of the two.
It's important, like, like KPMG is you're working for council. You're working for council, and if councilors have any questions, and we currently have a trust with our staff, with our finance. These sort of reports, they strengthen that trust that we want to maintain and actually try to strengthen that trust. So it's important that we have these sort of reports come to council. So
I agree, and certainly, to Mike and Terry, again, just thank you to them. They are, very forthcoming and engaging with us from an audit standpoint, which makes our job much easier in terms of that open dialogue, willingness to discuss issues when matters arise, whether it be audit, accounting, or the likes. So certainly, again, just a big thank you to Mike and Terry and the team for that working relationship for sure.
So my thoughts would be that if folks that you're trying to get in touch with are always busy, that would be concern number one. That would, okay, so I do see a hand popped up. Julie, who do we have first?
I do have the CAO. However, I have Councillor Russell as well.
Okay. Mr. CAO, would you like to speak first, or would you like Councillor Russell to speak first?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I think it's probably better for Councillor Russell to speak first. I'll speak at the end.
Go ahead, Councillor.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. Again, I didn't want to let this go by without having a question in this area. So it's really a small thing. It's probably not directed to Scott. It's probably directed to Mr. CAO or to Mr. Walla. It's just something that always, again, I hear my Vice Chair, Councillor Pachariva, echo in my brain regularly about how we don't have an expense problem. We have a revenue problem. Again, I'm just looking at again, I know it's just a snapshot on time looking at 2019 versus 2018, but our expenses are just slightly outpacing our revenue. Again, I realize really slightly, again, by 0.4%. Just wondering if your thoughts, if this has any impact on the 2020 budget, or again, if Mr. Walla has any historical reference, again, I don't want to put her on the spot, about how this may have been trending the last few years. And if not, maybe again, this can just come back as an FYI to council somewhere down the road. It's just a point of curiosity, if anything else.
Who are you directing that question to again?
It would either be probably to Mr. Walla or
Okay.
Mr. CAO.
Through the chair,
Mr. Walla, go ahead.
I can give it a shot. So the one thing to keep in mind with municipalities is that we do have to operate with a balanced budget. So a lot of the revenue, or not a lot, but some of the revenue that comes in, it gets set aside in our accumulated surplus, and we only recognize it when we actually use it. For example, development charges, our federal gas tax, those kind of things. They only show up when they get used. So it actually makes sense that the revenue and the expense are very closely tied together, because we're not in the business to make money, but we have to cover all of our expenses. So.
Okay. Just again, my thought was that our expenses seem to be growing at a pace faster than our revenue is growing. Again, in just what would appear to be 2019. I know it's a very small snapshot. Just wondering if at some point we can get some trending on that historically. Not for tonight, but just for somewhere down the road.
Through the chair, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Go ahead,
Mr. Chair.
Did you want to add to that?
Oh, I was just gonna say through the chair, I'll get back to you.
Okay, thank you.
Perfect. Okay, Mr. CAO, would you like to speak?
Through Mr. Chair, no, just some final comments. I mean, I know Scott mentioned it, that Lois is retiring. Lois has been with us definitely for a number of years since I started. She's not on the call, but I know Scott will pass on both her thanks and appreciation. And I think we're one of her last large audits, or last municipal audits. I think I asked her that, and she was far happier for an auditor that I've ever seen in our last kind of touch point as she was going over the results. So I thought it was either we're doing a wonderful job, which is true, but I think, wishing her well, and I hope Scott takes that back on behalf of all of us. I think Lois has been a great asset for KPMG and a steadfast, I think, advisor for the town of Lincoln for many, many years. And as well, Scott and his team have helped us out over the last year. I think we're often looking at them. They have value-added services. I think about things like some of their lean processes. And so they've come in, they've talked to us. And so, I take the comments earlier from Councillor McPherson relative to kind of, I think, engaging Scott and his team and the various other partners when we want to look at kind of best practices. So things we continue to do with Scott and his team, both things that are highlighted in our audits generally, but just good, positive, I think, learning improvements. And I think you're going to see us focus a little bit more on some of those lean processes as we move forward. So my thanks to Scott and his team as well.
Thank you very much, Mike. Thank you very much, Scott. It looks like a positive report. Looks like a good relationship between yourselves and our staff, and that's first step forward. There was a question I had on page 8, but regarding cash at the end of the year. When I look at financial statements, I'm always looking for these large swings in amounts, and you're in typical financial statements, you're looking for consistencies or thereof, and but you answered those questions. I think municipal budgets are extremely difficult. You almost have to look at 3 or 4 years worth of budgets to really get a true indication of a specific year, as you have these highs and lows and transfers of assets.
No, I agreed. And that's just, part of the nuance of municipal financial statements. I mean, Lincoln is no different than any municipality as it relates to financial statement presentation. It does make it a bit hard, in your shoes as council to see what you see all year. And then the set of financial statements that might show something that looks slightly different. Even your budget numbers here are tweaked, if you will, to align for public sector accounting standards. So there are some subtle differences that can happen between that. And so the swings there, while it might seem a little bit abnormal from year to year or time to time, or things like accounting surpluses, it's really a function of how you have to present revenue and expenses and capital spend on the statements versus how you might recognize them on the budget side. So sure.
No, it's important. I mean, we're all just regular people. We're counselors, but we're regular people. And to take a document like this and try to fully understand it is extremely difficult, which is why we retain your services. So we appreciate that very much. Okay, does anyone, I see no other questions. Julie,
No other hands are raised, Chair Micklick.
There's no hands raised?
Nope.
Okay, good. All right, there being no further discussion, I have a motion moved by Councillor Rinjema that the presentation by KPMG regarding the Town of Lincoln 2019 audit report be received, and that the consolidated audited financial statements for the fiscal year ending December 31st, 2019 be received and approved. I will now ask our chair to call the vote.
Thank you. If everybody could remove themselves off of mute, and I'll call your name. Councillor Brunet.
Yes.
Councillor McPherson.
Yes.
Councillor Pachariva.
Yes.
Councillor Reimer.
Yes.
Councillor Rajima.
Yes.
Councillor Russell.
Yes.
Councillor Timmers.
Yes.
Councillor Micklick.
Yes.
And Mayor Easton.
Yes, support. Thank you, Madam Chair.
And that carries.
I'm worried about step 2.
Okay. We have now concluded the General Business and Finance Committee agenda. We will now rotate to allow Councillor and Chair Paul McPherson to assume the chair at this time for the Planning and Economic Development Committee agenda.
Thank you very much, Mr. Deputy Mayor. We now are looking at 7.1 delegations. We have no delegations this evening for the Planning and Economic Development Committee. Moving to the consent agenda, we are now considering consent agenda item number 7.2, Municipal Heritage Citizen Advisory Committee minutes of October 8th, 2020. Would any member like to remove this item from the consent agenda to discuss? Seeing none, Madam Clerk?
None. I don't see any.
Okay, very good. There being no discussion, I have a motion moved by Councillor Timmers that council receive for information item 7.2, Municipal Heritage Citizen Advisory Committee minutes of October 8th, 2020. I will now ask the clerk to call out the vote. Julie, go ahead.
Thank you. Councillor Brunet.
Yes.
Councillor Micklick.
Yes.
Councillor Pachariva.
Yes.
Councillor Reimer.
Yes.
Councillor Rajima.
Yes.
Councillor Russell.
Yes.
Councillor Timmers.
Yes.
Councillor McPherson.
Yes.
And Mayor Easton.
Support.
Thank you. That carries.
We will now consider item 7.3, confidential items. Before I read the motion and we motion to move into closed, I would like to explain what will happen for those watching this electronic meeting. First, there will be a closed session statement that the clerk will go through for all of council and staff that will be attending the closed session. Once that is completed, we will move on with the motion to move into closed. The clerk will be turning off the live webcast during the closed portion of the meeting. Once we have completed the closed portion of the meeting, we will resume with the live webcast and carry on with the public portion of the meeting, and we'll read the motions in public session. I will ask the clerk to conduct the closed session statement for all of council and others attending the closed session. Julie, go ahead.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Before we begin the closed session, all members are reminded that any discussions in closed are to remain confidential as per our procedural bylaw and our code of conduct for the town of Lincoln. Before we begin, I need each member that is attending electronically to confirm the following: that you understand that matters are to remain confidential, and confirm that no one else is present with you, and confirm that no one else can hear this closed session, and confirm that you are not using any electronic devices other than your tablet, computer, or telephone for the video conferencing, and confirm that you are not recording this portion of the meeting. If you acknowledge all of the above, please reply with "I understand" and confirm to all of the statements as I read your name aloud. Mayor Easton.
I confirm all of the statements.
Councillor Rajima.
I understand and confirm all of the statements.
Councillor Russell.
I understand and confirm all of the statements.
Councillor Brunet.
I understand and confirm all of the statements.
Councillor Pachariva.
I understand and confirm to all of the statements.
Councillor McPherson.
I understand and confirm to all of the statements.
Councillor Miklick.
I understand and confirm to all of the statements.
Councillor Timmers.
I understand and confirm to all of the statements.
Councillor Reimer.
I understand and confirm to all the statements.
And thank you. And I'll do the same with the staff that are attending in closed session. CAO Mike Kirkopoulos.
I understand and confirm to all of the statements.
Finance Treasurer Terry Terwala.
I understand and confirm to all statements.
Director of Planning and Development Kathleen Dale.
I understand and confirm to all of the statements.
Associate Director of Planning and Development Matt Bruder.
I understand and confirm to all of the statements.
Director of Community Services Shan McKay.
I understand and confirm to all of the statements.
Fire Chief Greg Hudson.
I understand and confirm to all of the statements.
Director of Public Works Dave Graham.
I understand and confirm to all of the statements.
Director of Economic Development and Communications Paul Deaney.
I understand and confirm to all the statements.
Manager of Corporate Communications Liliana Busnello.
I understand and confirm to all the statements.
Legislative and Committee Coordinator Aaron Plong.
I understand and confirm to all the statements.
And I myself, Town Clerk Julie Kirkos, I understand and confirm to all of the statements. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. I have a motion moved by Councillor Brunet under Section 239 of the Municipal Act. Notice is hereby given that council adjourn to closed session in order to address item 7.3 as follows. Pursuant to the Municipal Act, Section 239 2C, a proposed or pending acquisition or disposition of land by the municipality as it pertains to a verbal update from the CAO and confidential report PD-32-20. I will now ask our clerk to call out the vote.
Thank you. Councillor Brunet.
Yes.
Councillor McPherson.
Yes.
Councillor Miklick.
Yes.
Councillor Pachariva.
Yes.
Councillor Reimer.
Yes.
Councillor Rajima.
Yes.
Councillor Russell.
Yes.
Councillor Timmers.
Yes.
Mayor Easton.
Yes.
And that carries.
Madam Clerk, please proceed with the technical requirements to move into closed session.
Thank you.